Hey, it's Michelle with Brilliant Quest, and today I want to talk with you about how to get unconfused. Oh yes, uh, I did another video where I talk about a book called Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish, and what I'm going to talk to you about today is inspired by that book. And he talks in certain areas about how to get certain kind of rules in place for what you want to do, so that you don't have to think about them by the energy that it takes to make a choice or a decision. Well, there is a model that has helped me and many people, and maybe you've heard of it or maybe you haven't, but it is a model that is, they call it a sense model, where you can take the problem, issue, objective that you want to do, and you can work your way through this model to not only figure out what you're going to do, but first and foremost, to make sense of what you're dealing with. Too many times we are victims of assumptions of simplicity, meaning that we'll have a problem. And because we have a cursory knowledge, a surface understanding of what it will take to get it done, it usually takes us longer. We almost want to give up. Have you ever, like, say for instance, you said you want to renovate something, and you do your little, you do your work, you watch a few YouTube videos, and then off you go. And the project costs way more than you thought. It takes up more time, and the skills needed are not necessarily as easy. That's one of the issues of not making sense of what you're getting into, so that you can make the right decision on how to proceed. All right. So the name, and it's an actual model. I'm gonna put a picture up of it now. And it's called, I know it looks like Cinefin, but it is pronounced Cynefin. Cynefin. It's a Welsh word. It means place in Welsh, but it is a model that will help you to figure out what you're getting yourself into. All right. So let's, take a look at it. And I think I need to maybe scooch over just a tad so I can have more room to maybe just sit it right over there. Okay. So anyway, this Cynefin model, it has 4 different stations with something in the middle. I'm gonna look at my notes for a little bit over here, you guys, and just talk you through it. So I have actually used this model to help clients and companies to figure out where they are. I've used this model in my consulting one-on-ones to help people figure out what exactly they're dealing with. And I've used this model in my own life, because I'm gonna tell you, the hardest clarity to get is on your own. And this model works. So don't let its weird look fool you. It is really good. And I don't want to say the word simple, but it will help you get into the ballpark, so that you don't have false critical assumptions making you miss the mark of understanding what you need to do, how you need to do, or even if you need to not do it until you have other, resources in place. All right. So in this particular model, we have where you'll see, and I might put 2 different ones up. Okay, you know what? I'll put the one up I think that I made, where it has obvious, complicated, complex, and chaotic. All right. So the first thing I want you to understand is most people think that they're problem solving, but they're living in this lower right quadrant of obvious. And this is where we get benchmarks. This is where we get best practices. All that stuff lives in the obvious, because what it is where we have like a roadmap. We have a understanding, if you will, of how to do something. And it is where, when they say sense, meaning it's almost common sense, where we say you can categorize it, you can respond to it. It means that we have a roadmap. You can put it into steps. Until I really started getting serious about how to make decisions, I didn't even realize that some decisions cannot be put into steps. They must go through a certain process at first. All right. So, what I'm saying with this, and like I said, I want you to stick with it, because at first, just because it looks unfamiliar does not mean that it's not doable. All right. So a lot of people, including myself, had made the mistake of thinking that all problems lived in this first little bubble of obvious. And another way of looking at this is to think of, when you come to a situation, you want to say, well, you can just do X, Y, Z, and then you're done. It's like there is steps, there is benchmarks of other people who have done it, and that's not the case. When I was reading this book, and please, if you haven't checked it out, go and watch that video where I talk about the ego and how it's messing with your ability to think clearly. I was struck anew in that if you don't watch it, we'll all get back to this one little area where we think that this is where the land of problems and decisions live, where if we can just find somebody else who's done it, if we can just set up a recipe or a step action, it'll all be solved. And that is erroneous at best. So as you can see, that maybe represents 25% or 1 in 4 times what you're dealing with. And that's why I wanted to bring this out. So the next one up, we'll just go up above it from the obvious one. And you guys, I'm looking back and forth from my notes, so please forgive me if I'm not giving you a lot of good eye contact today. But the next one is complicated. All right. Now, complicated is actually where a lot of people need to be looking to learn how to do or deal with what they're dealing with. Because when you get into this complicated, and every time you see the word sense, that means it's something that you can find your way by thinking about it, by researching it, and all of that. So the things that are on this side, the obvious and the complicated, are things that in and of yourself you could probably find out what you need about them if you get started. If you do a little research. So that's what that word sense means when you see that. But in this area of complicated, it means that you also need to use analysis. And this kind of analysis is not where you're necessarily having to bring in a lot of data. No, this analysis is where you start to try different things, set up some hypotheses and see which ones work out. Because the complicated decision is not clear cut. It's not where you can just go find someone else who has done it and follow their steps, or where it can just be ABC equals 1, 2, 3. You have to understand that once you have figured out that this is complicated, and that's another thing, using this model shows that once you bring it here, if you're not able to put it into ABC 1, 2, 3, then the next viable option is to move it up to complicated. And this helps you to start seeing hidden gaps in knowledge. It helps you to start seeing that one answer might not solve this. That's why underneath the sense and analyze, you see respond. And respond means that once you start getting your data back, you need to respond to what actually works. And you'll find out that a lot of times it's not just one answer. That's why it's complicated. And under that, you see, that's where we have good practice. Yeah, we have where it's a good practice to do this, meaning that it might not work, but you got options. All right. So the below one, the obvious one, is best practice. It's like, this is how you bake the cake. This is how the cake turns out. The next one, the complicated, is, oh, we have to enlarge this cake recipe because we got to feed 1,000 people instead of 6. And so now you got to figure out how to go about increasing the recipe so that you can feed the 1,000. And because there are more variables in place, you might not be able to just double the recipe. It might go kablooey. You might have to, depending on the humidity in the kitchen, depending on the ingredients that are available, you might have to try different things. That's where you start getting into knowing what to substitute to get this recipe where you can feed the 1,000. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So we have moved from the obvious, which is your best practice. This is what's going to happen when you put this in. The next one is complicated. If you have a situation where you are not going to get the desired result based on what you have sensed or what you have searched and benchmarked, then you're probably needing to start to look and see if it fits in the complicated area. All right, stick with me. I promise you, this is going to work. I'm teaching you some Lean Six Sigma stuff in about 20 minutes. Okay, so just stick with me on this. If your situation is like, I don't know. I don't necessarily know if a cake is even the answer to feed this 1,000 people. I don't know if we can pull this off with what we even have. Maybe something totally new. Maybe we should get out the box. There shouldn't be a box in the first place. Maybe we should get out the box. Maybe we should start trying to look for something else. That's when you're moving into the complex. And with the complex, you'll notice it says probe, sense, respond. So with the complex, this is where you start bringing in people. Because this situation can't be solved by one person. It requires a committee. It requires input from different areas, different departments, if you will. There are sometimes when we think that, oh, this is a small little thing. Okay, off the top of my head, you need to bring in more income, right? Well, you get on YouTube and you start looking, well, how do I do my side hustle? How do I do this? How do I do that? And you discover that I can just do this and make this kind of money, and you try it and it doesn't work. So then, using this model that Michelle is showing you, you move up to the complicated. And the complicated says that maybe I need to try different little things to see which one is going to work best for me to bring in more income on the side hustle. Well, in your sensing what you need to do, in your trying out and your analysis and how to respond to which one to see which one is a good practice. So like they say, don't have all your eggs in one basket. Have multiple income streams. But then you notice, there is something missing. That no matter how I try to do this, it's just not working. You move to the complex because now you do realize that you got a learning curve issue and you don't know what you don't know. And you're making certain assumptions, or the persons that you've heard this from more so are making assumptions about your previous knowledge and experience. And because you don't have that, where it might have been an obvious situation for them, your situation is a complex one. You see how I talk about how this is a sense-making model where it helps you to make sense of what you're really doing? Because in the sense-making model, you start probing, meaning you start looking for a mentor or a group, whether it be a Facebook group, school, or whatever, of people who are either your comrades or people that you're wanting to network with or people that you're wanting to be mentored by, who bring into the conversation stuff that you never even knew. Like, for instance, you have to understand the basic tenets of doing anything to generate income online in a digital manner. You must have a way to communicate directly. You must understand what your distributions are, what your platforms are, what your investments are, when and if you need additional human resources, other resources, all those things. that you thought were obvious and they weren't, because now we're complex. And this is why it's called an emergent practice, because you are emerging into a new area that requires input from other areas or other peoples that you don't naturally have the ability to go and gather and get. Y'all, this should be making sense. If it's not, leave me some comments and I'll try to address them. Okay, but still with this, so we started with a cake. Now I've moved it to, making money as a side hustle online. And you've now discovered that what they presented as a best practice that is obvious that this is what you do. You've tried to do it. You've discovered that this doesn't translate well for you. So you probably need to try to have a better mix. And in trying to figure out that better mix of a good practice, you've still said, I don't have all the necessary tools I need to pull this off on my own. So I need to go get more stuff, whether that's an online class or a one-on-one consult, me, check the links, me, or whatever, that you've moved into a complex situation. Okay. So that's the next step that you move after you have done what you said. Okay. And then the next one in the red area here says chaotic. And chaotic is where you have to act, sense, respond. And it's a novel practice. All right. Now, what I've done is I've put the little boxes here where it says we're currently here. I've put danger, stay away from here. I've put my goal is to be here. And then my next move should be here. And I've put that because little did you know, a lot of people are having to deal with problems that nobody can truly understand. And in my wheelhouse, mental pain and anguish. What happens when you go and you type in mental health? Everybody wants to talk to you about the mental illness when they don't address the mental health or the temporary mental setbacks to having this mental health. And so I want to share this, and I want to give this to you because this will even help you to get on the road to where you need to be for that. Because if you look at this same model that I've put here and you go back to the obvious, what happens when you go and you try to say, why can't I think straight? Why do I have panic attacks or depression, or I swing back and forth? Why can't I make myself feel anything? Why don't I have a sense of urgency when I need to take action? These are some of the questions. Most of the times when you go, the lowest hanging fruit is the obvious. And it's where people say, well, just do this, do that. Okay, you're going to meditate, you're going to journal, you're going to talk about it, blah, 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 blah. You do that. It doesn't work. Then you say, oh, well, I need to go out and try stuff. That's where you get into the complicated area where you're like, okay, well, I'll try these different modalities. I'll try these nootropics for my mind. I'll try this breathing. I'll do that. And you have some success, but it's all discombobulated where you're doing all these different things and it's still not hitting on it. So you're like, I need more help. So then you go into the groups and you try to, start to get more help, and you start learning that, these people are having different situations that I never even considered, but they're bringing me information to help me to get to where I need to be. And what you're figuring out is you were starting in chaotic. Chaotic is that red circle at the bottom left. And that's where you had to take action. You had to then try to sense your way through it by going through the levels of doing the obvious that people say, and then having to stumble your way into the complicated where you now start putting out hypotheses and trying different things to see if it works. And then understanding that I can't do this by myself. I don't know everything. And then moving into the complex. Okay. So this sense making model helps you. Now, I will tell you, in the middle part, you see this little gray thing that says disorder. Well, that's also confusion. And if you stay in the chaotic section where you don't know what to do, because the chaotic requires you to make a whole new something that's never been seen or never done before, it is easy to fall into the disorder. It is easy to fall into the disorder if you go to the obvious and it doesn't help you and you don't have that knowledge, input, or natural drive to try something else to get up to the complicated. You fall into disorder. What happens if you get into the complicated and you just keep trying over and over and over, never realizing that maybe this is out of my scope of knowing and I need to get more knowing for more different people or departments or whatever? You fall into disorder. All of them can get you down into that sinkhole of disorder and confusion. And confusion is of the devil. It is. Confusion is hell. And you never want to get into that crevasse. You never want to get into that area. And so what you want to do is don't look at any one of these 4 stations as bad. Look at them as a way to help you to make sense of your world. Make sense of where you need to be and what you need to be doing. Because too many times, everybody tries to approach every decision, problem, issue by thinking it all lives in that obvious bubble. And 9 times out of 10, one time out of 4, it doesn't. All right. And it's okay to be in the chaotic because there are actually going to be times, or people, I should say, there are going to be people who thrive in the chaotic because they are willing to go out. They're your trailblazers and busters. They are your people who live on the fringes, who are risk takers and are willing to go to uncharted areas to try something new that's never been done, so that they can respond by coming up with a plan, with a decision, with a knowledge, so that it becomes novel meaning new, novel practice. All right. And so use this as a way to help you to help yourself. Like I said before, it's not hard. Now, I said the obvious danger, stay away. I say that because you will fall into the trap of thinking things are very simple and one, two, three recipe. And if you're not careful, you'll fall into disorder and you'll be in a state of confusion for a long time. So understand, you got this. There are ways to help you. And one of the best things that can happen is if you start now and you realize that I have been trying to approach different problems the same way in the obvious, and you start putting this little model out there and you're like, is it a complicated thing where I can figure out different ways to approach it where I have a good practice? Do I have, because it helps, like I said, it helps you to show your assumptions, and it helps you to see the areas where you might be lacking in knowledge, education, networking, exposure, experience. Or do I have a complex problem? Or am I in the land of chaos where I got to do this on my own? Because believe it or not, once you start learning how to move through these and you get more and more familiar with it, you get faster and faster at it. And before you know it, you, you are out here being a trailblazer, helping so many other people. And take a screenshot of this. This is one I did actually for a client. I took their personal information out of it, but I put it here so that you could have it. And just know that you're not alone. If something is too hard for you, it might be a wink, wink from the powers that be, the universe, whatever you want to call the benevolent all, that's saying, baby, you're trying to use the obvious to solve something that's complex. Get some help. All right. So thank you so much. Don't forget to check the links in the description. Support, subscribe, comment, like, share, do all those things. And thank you so much. This has been Michelle, your big sis with Brilliant Quest. Brilliant Quest. I'll see you soon. Bye.